Hey guys, Nicole here with Obscure Reptiles and Caging, and today we're going to be doing a hatchling care guide for Ackie monitors. So let's get started. Okay guys, today we're going to be doing a hatchling care guide for Ackie monitors. So there are two different types of Ackies, red and yellow. And it's not only their color, but it's actually the locale from where they're from in Australia. So, for example, I have a very red looking female. She's actually a Mount Isa yellow, but she looks red. So you have to really know and trust the person you're getting them from to trust the genetics, because there's really no way to tell. There are slight hints and stuff like that, and you can even crossbreed them, which you don't really want to do because then you're just getting washed out reds and yellow. Reds do stay a little bit smaller, but they are known to be a lot more feisty, or can be, and yellows get bigger, but they have more of a mild personality. This right here is one of our hatchlings from this year. He or she is only about a week old. They actually cannot tell the gender of an Ackie until they're at least a year old. You can have hints and guesses before that time, but no reputable breeder will sell a baby and say it's a male or female. There are tricks like shining a flashlight under the base of their tail, and sometimes you're able to see a hemipene, or sometimes you see nothing, so it gives you an indicator. But for example, Dart, my Mount Isa girl, she 100% had two little bumps when we flashlighted her. Her head and neck were huge, and she basically showed every sign of being a male until she had eggs. You really can't tell, and good breeders won't even make a guess for you. But they're going to be a little bit larger than this when they're ready to go, because these guys start eating right out of the egg. They only take a few weeks to be ready to ship. So these guys are 1 week old right now, but they will be a little bit larger. The first thing to know about these guys is they're called Ackie monitors, and they're also called spiny tail monitors. So both are the same thing. Full-grown adults are around 2 feet long to 2.5 feet long with their tails. Males being a little bit larger, and yellows also being larger. So for example, my male yellow Demi, he's the biggest one that I have. To have a cage set up and ready for these guys, you guys know how much I do not like glass, but this is the only thing that is escape proof when they first come out of the egg, because they will cram into the smallest spaces and holes, and I haven't been able to find or make any kind of cage that is escape proof other than glass. Unfortunately, because I have to use glass, I have to spray it down 3 times a day. All the stuff inside the cage has to be ceramic so it holds the temperature correctly, because these guys actually need a 150-degree hot spot. My reptile room is already at 80 degrees, which is what their cold requirement is on the cooler side of the cage. So I have to have a huge bulb for this just to be able to use this glass. When you guys get babies and they're ready to go home, they shouldn't need glass. They'll be large enough that they can fit into a normal enclosure. But my other problem is if you have an open front and you have multiple baby Ackies, like one clutch I had was 20 babies. When you go to open that door and they just try to run at the food, it's very easy to lose one. So that is something I want to avoid. So for this very small clutch, this very small 10-gallon tank with lots and hides being sprayed down every day, this works for their first few weeks of life. But if you're bringing home a baby, you're going to want to start out with, I'd recommend something like a 3x2x2 or 3x2x1 just to start out with. It all depends on how you want to set up the cage. They need lots of places to hide, and they need different places to hide with different temperatures. So if you make piles of rocks, they're going to cram in the rocks. They'll cram under the water dishes. I like to use PVC pipes because they love to squish into the pipes, and that's where they sleep at night. I put hide boxes. I hide them down in the dirt and all that kind of stuff. But when you first get a baby home, you probably want to do paper towels as the substrate, so you can just keep an eye on them. After the first week or two and you know that they're eating, doing good, then you can actually use substrate. And the best is dirt mixed with play sand. This is the type of dirt we use. It has no fertilizers, no chemicals, anything like that. It's just plain old dirt. You mix that with the sand because it helps hold humidity, and it allows them to dig through the dirt and leave almost like tunnels because they love to dig. They're going to want a few inches of substrate. If you're just having a pet, make sure you're giving them a good amount of substrate to dig through. If you breed, then you're going to want lay boxes and things like that, but we'll go over all that in a breeding video specifically. This one's just for if you go and get a baby and what to expect and bring it home. These are a species that need a UVB. You're going to want a tube UVB, not just a small one. And every 10 to 12 months, you're going to want to be replacing that bulb. Even if it hasn't gone out, it's putting off less UVB. So you want to make sure your animals are healthy. These are species that can live 15 or 20 years. So you want to make sure that your animal's getting the best care. These guys are established and they're growing. You're going to want to put them in something equivalent to, let's say, a 4x2x16 or larger. All mine are in that size. I want to upgrade them all to 6x2x2s, but until I have a bigger space here in the next year, these are the size that I have. But you want to do as big as you can for these guys because they're very active, they're very curious. You can switch up what's in each cage, move it around. They like to explore. They are similar to bearded dragons in the way that they need a timer. So they need 12 hours of the UVB and their hotspot and 12 hours of darkness, and they need that all year round. Once you switch them over to dirt and sand, you're going to want to make sure that you are spraying or misting down that cage because you want it to at least be wet. You don't want it to fully dry out. What I like to do is on the side of the enclosure with the UVB, I soak that side because that way it keeps the cool side very cool and they have a wet and humid area, and I don't really worry about doing the warm side too much because it just evaporates and makes it really humid in that enclosure for a very long time. When it comes to feeding these guys, you are going to feed babies every single day. Their main food source are going to be crickets. You want to do calcium dusted crickets, and you want to make sure you're giving them calcium on most of their meals. They're not going to eat any sort of vegetables. These guys are only going to be eating meats and bugs. On top of the crickets, you can also do things like dubias, waxworms, mealworms. You can do, on occasion, you can even go and you can do eggs, like quail eggs. You can give them the whole shell, everything like that, crack it open for them. You can do small pieces of shrimp. Sometimes I'll do ground turkey, but these are like once a month kind of treats things, not something that you're going to do every day. You can give them rodents, but that's also going to be more of a treat, and you want to make sure it's, for example, if it's a mouse, you want to make sure it's larger than a hopper, because if they're anything smaller, they have a very high fat content, and you don't want a fat Ackie. So I would also highly, highly recommend, if you ever do that, is a frozen thawed, because the way that Ackies eat and kill things is they will bite and they will go up to a rock or something hard and they will hit their head with the food in it to kill the animal. So that's going to be a very bad, painful death if you're trying to feed live rodents. I really don't even feed mice, maybe once in a great while. Sometimes if a female had just had a bunch of eggs and she's very small, then that's when I would do that, but they're going to eat the animal whole. They're not going to break it apart. They're just going to kill it and try to swallow it whole. So make sure you're not giving something very large to an animal with a very small head. But especially as a baby, that's not something you're going to have to worry about. If you're just doing crickets, dubias, and then a mixture of different kinds of worms and stuff like that, that's more than enough. As they get older, you're going to want to feed them less, maybe 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what you're feeding them and how much you're feeding them. The nice things that I found is if you do crickets and you have a good dirt and sand substrate, it almost becomes like a bioactive enclosure. The way that it works, at least here for me, is when I feed crickets, you just dump them in there because you want the animals to be able to search, and it's good for them to be able to hunt down the crickets. So sometimes there's crickets that get away and they stay living in the enclosure. They don't hurt the animals. They just live in the enclosure and down in the dirt. And dirt and sand is actually the substrate that crickets like to have eggs in. They actually take their food dish and kind of put it level with the dirt and substrate. And that way, when these baby crickets are hopping around, they fall into the glass. They can't get out, and then they're actually more food now for the Ackies. I spot clean, but most of the time it's only like every month, every 6 weeks, I clean out the entire enclosure. I'll spot check it every day or anytime I see any kind of a mess, but normally I only have to do a full clean out every 4 to 6 weeks. One thing that they really enjoy when it comes to hides and stuff like that is I use ceramic things because it holds heat, and there's a lot of little nooks and crannies for them. They love cork bark and also PVC pipes. This is just some scrap piping I had, and it looks very, very tiny, but the baby Ackies will actually hide in this and they will stay in this. So all my animals have a bunch of different assorted size PVC, so that and they actually like to sleep in this, so because they feel so confined. So I would recommend some PVC for the enclosures, some smaller chunks, and as they age, some bigger pieces, because they love to sleep inside of it. Lastly, when it comes to handling, you're going to want to handle them as much as you can. When they're really small, if they're very skittish and very afraid of you, you can go in there when it's cooler and they're a lot less active and pick them up and just pet them and hold them and show them that you're not something big and bad. Honestly, what I do best is, especially when they're young, I'll go in with no fear and just pick them up. Sometimes they might open their mouth and try to scare you. You can't show them that you're afraid because they're very intelligent animals and they know now that you're afraid of my mouth, so they'll keep doing it when they're nervous or afraid of you. You can also, when you start feeding them, I suggest tongue feeding them. And after they're comfortable and used to you tongue feeding them, you can start putting your hand in the enclosure, keep going closer and closer to your hand, and then eventually get them walking on your hand. That's why front opening PVC enclosures are the best, because if you're reaching down on them, you're a big scary animal coming after them. But if you're reaching from their level, you're a lot less intimidating than something reaching from above. And that's about it. They're very good animals to have. They're very intelligent. They all have their own personalities, and honestly, they're one of my favorites. And that's it for this video. If you guys have any questions, you can put them in the comments below, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do. We still have a giveaway going, so go back a couple of videos and check that out. There's still time to enter, and we'll see you guys in the next one.